You're listening to Savory. It's a podcast about the people and processes behind food production and the politics that shape our understanding of the food system. I'm your host, Marika Dunham. On this episode of Savory, I talk with Vince Caruso about his sustainable and diversified produce farm, Caruso Farms, in Snohomish, Washington. This interview took place on a very rainy Friday evening at his farm in his packing shed. So what you're hearing in the background is rain on a tin roof. And at some point in the interview, we transition into his house end. So the sonic experience of this episode is pretty immersive. I really enjoyed talking with Vince. He is a farmer that I have worked for in the past, so I knew him quite well, and it was really great to reconnect with him and to share the work that he's doing with you guys. Thank you so much for meeting with me on your Friday. I just want to know a little bit more about yourself and your experience with the food system.
Okay, I'm Vince Caruso. And we have Caruso Farms, which is 10 acres, roughly. It varies every year, of mixed vegetables. Traditionally would be called a truck farm because we load all the vegetables up in a truck and take it to market once a week or twice a week. So we grow probably 60 different varieties of vegetables and some fruits. And we market those through a CSA, farmers market, and then through a distributor who in turn usually ends up at institutional sales like the restaurants or some stuff goes into schools and things like that. Let's see, we spent all day today harvesting. On Friday there was 4 of us. No, wait. Yep, 4 of us, because I got to count myself. And so we spent 4 people, each spent 8 to 10 hours each, depending on who it was, all to bring food for a Saturday market and then a Sunday market. So if you look at 4 times 40 man hours, just say, because some stuff did happen yesterday too. You get 40 man hours into. Plus, I'll spend 2 full days at the farmer's market, which are 10 to 12 hour days. So now we're up to, 60 some hours? And we already spent the money on the 60 hours, and now tomorrow we've got to earn all that back and hopefully make some profit. So, what else? I don't know.
How long have you been farming for?
I think we're on year 8. It's always hard to say what year were you gardening that got out of control and then all of a sudden you're farming, but I think our business license puts us at year 10 or 11 right now, something like that. Yeah, I think at Edmonds Farmers Market, I think this is our 10th season there, and we took 1 year off. So that put us at 10 or 11 years.
Were you working for a while, for a couple of years before you had employees?
Yeah, with family help for probably 2 years. It was myself and Anna, my wife, and her parents would help out. And, there was other friends and neighbors and other family members that would come and spot help. That went for a year or 2, and then then we started getting some help after that. Yeah.
So you started farming in Washington. Are you first generation farmer?
Yes.
And what has that experience been like for you starting to farm? What was your motivation in?
Well, I think just having a passion for growing plants, and I grew up in a family that gardening was pretty important, I would say, like a socially important thing, going to picnics and bragging up your own beets kind of thing. And, you know, all the neighbors would check out each other's gardens. And I think my grandparents always had a great garden. I think that's kind of a common story, though. Like when you think about growing up or something in your, you know, uncle's or your grandfather's garden or your parents' garden, I think that's probably where it starts. We started with a small, about maybe 1/8 of an acre, kind of really small, doing that. And then it just kind of gets in your blood, I think. I think a lot of farmers would say that no matter what it was, if it was vegetables, if it was horses, if it was dairy or something, just you can't help it.
Mm-hmm. What have been the challenges of starting a farm from scratch?
Well, from scratch not having any experience, and from scratch that the land was like fallow and there wasn't any infrastructure, are kind of two separate things, I think. But I would say from not having any experience, and like I didn't intern or I didn't work for another farmer, so I was learning as I was going. So there's the expected challenges there of lots of failures. And then anyone thought, you can learn a lot from your failures, which is all true. But I bet you I would have shaved 2 years off. I'd probably be 2 years ahead of where I'm at now as far as making better decisions about equipment or types of food to grow. So you get some bad advice when you first start, like, find a niche, and it's like, a niche is nice and all in some respects, but a niche with vegetables is like, there's a reason why most people grow the vegetables they grow. It's because that's what people consume. And I hear a lot of people starting like, what do you think about microgreens when they're asking me if they want to start? And I always think, well, there's, if you can find the market, but that's a niche thing, and you're better off selling things that are easier to market. And I didn't know that, so I tried a bunch of niche things that didn't work out. And then having no infrastructure was really hard because, you probably pay the same amount of price for land that has like an old rundown barn on it. And I think you'd be better off to have an old rundown barn. Like just to have concrete or roof is really important. We were washing vegetables outside under a market tent for 4 or 5 years, probably 4 years, 5 years, something like that. And then on gravel or landscape cloth for probably 6 years. And when you get concrete, it's like, whoa, this makes a big difference. Or you finally buy a cooler, and that was like a big deal. So, if I were able to start earlier and had experience, or came in from a family that maybe already had the cooler set up and the infrastructure set up, that would make things go quicker as far as becoming profitable quicker.
How would you describe your work to a person who's entirely unfamiliar with the food system?
How would I describe my work?
Like, could you walk me through an average day on the farm?
I guess so. I think people don't. I think I could walk you through. I don't think anyone would have a full understanding of it. But I think that's true with any job, probably. So if I were to describe a full day, it's so seasonal. Like today, it was wake up and just harvest all day, and we didn't do anything but, cut and trim and wash vegetables. But if it were earlier in the season, we would have, spent the morning weeding a little bit, seeding a little bit, and then harvesting a little bit. Which, every time you do one of those tasks, you're getting on different equipment, or you lose about an hour changing up from task to task. So there's a lot going on there. I guess, what was the question again?
How would you describe your job to someone who's entirely unfamiliar with the food system?
Oh, drudgery. I think that would be it. If it was but to describe the ins and outs, it's so complicated. That'd be like describing your job building a house. I guess you could give real kind of broad strokes and just say, I frame a house and I grow vegetables. I don't know, but any day I can get totally sidetracked because a piece of equipment breaks down, and then you're a mechanic that day, you can get, on a day tomorrow, I'm still farming, but I'm marketing all day, like smiling and listening to people tell me things that are either rude or very nice. I mean, you get both ends of the spectrum, a lot in between. I mean, just it's exhausting marketing all day. And then on Monday, I'll be doing all the paperwork and trying to get stuff sold for the week. So then I'm a salesman. I'm a different type of salesman, different type of marketing on Monday, trying to get all the kind of distribution kind of sales going. And I don't know, you'll spend a whole day just weeding, hands and knees for 3 hours, and then on a tractor for 3 hours, and then, if you're cultivating all day, lots of mowing of grass. I mean, there's so many little nooks and crannies, and just this, you go to a farm and people kind of have you call it kind of, red barn, white trim, everything's neatly mowed and nice, but every farm you go to, there's a pile somewhere, if not 10 piles somewhere. So, I mean, you spend a lot of time just moving materials, piles to piles to piles. So it's a tough description, I guess. I don't know if it's an accurate one.
Mm-hmm. What do you enjoy about your work?
Definitely the variety, although that's part of my complaint, but the variety's good. The short commute time is really nice. It's really nice to see a beginning and an end to a task. I have some jobs where it just seems like Groundhog Day every day, where there's no beginning or end. You just keep going. So it's nice to accomplish things. When you have, there's certain crops you grow, for me, that if you do a good job of it, other people who grow crops can recognize, oh, that's a tough thing to do to get things that nice, or so the strive for perfection when you're turning out product. I like that, and I like hard labor or just physical labor. Yeah.
What are the challenges of this work?
Well, I'm 40 now, and I'm starting to break down physically, and everyone says, oh, that's nothing, wait till you're 45 or 50. So that's a challenge. Of course, no health care. Well, you can pay for it out of pocket, I guess. That's a challenge because we're with raising a family. Money's a challenge. Marketing, I mean, growing is only half the battle. Actually getting it sold is probably the hardest part. And then just the long hours. 60-hour weeks or 7 days a week, so more than 60 hours. But anyways, just the grind is pretty tough. And you're catching me in an interview in the end of September, which is you're pretty fresh in April, May, you're pretty excited. And, I'll get that excitement back. I know the routine now, that come January after the holidays, I'll be ready to go again. So I like that too about farming, that cyclical, not only a beginning and end to tasks you do during the day, but a beginning and end to the cycle of the year. I imagine a dairy's probably not that way. It's probably just a constant grind. Yeah.
I think it's definitely a bit seasonal still with growing.
Harvest.
Yeah, forage, but it's definitely the 24/7.
Unless you're in one of those big farms that don't even grow their own food, right? You're just on a carousel and they just truck the food in all year.
Yeah, but then you're still milking every day.
You're just milking every day.
It's just the same thing
Drudgery.
with different temperature.
It's all drudgery.
Do you find this work meaningful for you?
Well, I call it drudgery. Yeah, it's meaningful. I mean, I think when we first started out, there was people ask you to when you write business plans or describe the farm, or you have to write elevator speeches or whatever they call them, talks, and a lot of times it's caring for the land and I don't know, there's a lot of kind of cliche things, but it's true. I just don't. I mean, it's become so inherent that I don't really restate the question.
Is this work meaningful?
Meaningful, yeah. So, So a lot of times, I think what I was getting at was a lot of times, when we talk about being meaningful to the environment or to the, your community and stuff like that. And I think early on we kind of focused on that and thought about that, but now I think you just can't help it. It just is when you're farming this way. We grow organically and small acreage. I mean, you're just in tune with everything. If you're screwing up the environment by mistreating the land, I mean, it's going to show up in your vegetables that you produce. It's not going to be sustainable long term or short term. I find, a lot of times, like the guys that work for me, the guys and girls that work for me, when they never see go to a farmer's market and see the appreciation the community has at the farmer's market for what you do. I mean, I go there, sell, and I get all of the positive feedback and the gratitude from people. And a lot of times, and I was just talking to Ann about this, a lot of times they never see that, so I think it would be kind of a good thing if, instead of just working in the field all the time, like say, hey, why don't you come set up and be there for the first 2 hours, just experience that, because people are really thankful and appreciative of the work. So, I mean, I take meaning from that. I think that's great. I've kind of, not jaded, but, you think like helping the community out by growing helpful food, and the community that comes and enjoys it and is willing to pay for it, we really are helping them out and they do appreciate it. But we enroll in some programs that that kind of get food to other people that can use certain food deserts or otherwise wouldn't have access to local food, and a lot of those people are really appreciative of it. It's really disheartening when people feel entitled to it when they come in those programs. We see that at the farmers market, which is really weird. It's a weird dynamic through like EBT programs or something like that. I think the programs are great, but when people get really upset with programs like that for political reasons or whatever, it's because they feel people are getting handouts for nothing because they have these experiences with these people that act that way and act entitled to it. And an example of it is like they might get an allotment of $4 or increments of $4, and we might be selling something for $5. And there'll be this battle with some people, quite a few, like, can I have it for $4? No, the price is $5. Oh, but I only have $4. And it's like, well, yeah, but, you could, it's hard for some people, but you could bump it up to $5. I mean, and not everyone's able to do that. Or you could find something else on the table that's that value, and then you just get hammered by some people. I think it's part of the fun of the different cultures. I think it's part of the fun of the shopping experience to kind of browbeat somebody, and it makes you feel really bad when, like, to be somebody's whipping boy in that situation, and it's like, you're a captive audience. You can't kind of like defend yourself very well. So that gets a little disheartening. I don't know if I explained that well. You probably edit all that out.
If you want me to, I will.
Well, it sounds terrible, like to be ungrateful for. I mean, some people have a really tough situation. Usually, those people are really grateful when they can get something for $4. It's usually the people that like have a watch that probably costs as much as you make in a year, and they're still giving you a $4 coupon, and you're like, how did you get a WIC check? Like, what's going on? And you get really disheartened. Like and you think like, oh, when you hear these political things about like welfare state or something like that, it's like, oh, that's why people have developed these totally what do you want to say, like just mean ideas about, like, I mean, social services are needed, right? But if you're sitting there and you see people like cheating with social services all the time, that's all you can focus on, and you get pretty jaded, I guess. I don't know. Have you had that experience?
Personally, no. But I know, like, interacting with members of the public, it's such a different experience and, like, such a different type of like interacting with the consumer is such a different part of the food system, right? And they have a lot of different expectations coming to a farmer's market about what a farm should look like and how food stamps and like those social services fit into that network. So I can imagine that you're dealing with a lot of different people and a lot of different voices and expectations and opinions. So I can definitely see how that situation would unfold.
Well, it's interesting at a farmer's market, like let's say tomorrow starts at 9. From 9 till about 11, those are like the people that are there early to get the food and get out of there, and they're not there for like a social event or entertainment. They're there to get their shopping done, and they want nice. They're voting with their money. They're willing. There's always a good deal on the table. Some things are not a good deal, and it's because you can get green beans really cheap because they have machines that'll pick them, and then you can get them for $2 a pound. But when you hand pick them, they're just not that way. And some people would say, well, we sell them for, let's say, $5 a pound. It's like, well, then we shouldn't be selling them at all if they're that expensive. And I totally get it. I would have a really hard time spending $5 a pound on green beans. I don't think that's the deal on the table. But people that appreciate like a really fine, thin, fresh green bean, and that's the food they like, they appreciate that. And then later on in the day, you get to like 2 o'clock, and there's people just kind of passing through, and they're like, $5 for green beans? It's like, lady, just keep it to yourself. I mean, I get it. It's an expensive item. It's not, but there's more to it than that. It's just not me trying to gouge you for green beans. It's like this item is not at scale. It's cheap, and we've gotten used to that. But really, if you pick 15 pounds of green beans, it takes you, to fill up a 5-gallon bucket of green beans, it does not happen in 10 minutes. It takes 30 minutes or something like that. It just depends on the time of year. But, so that's, the prices aren't just willy-nilly and people aren't trying to gouge you. It's thought, there's thought that goes into when you price something. And, you stop selling green beans because no one's buying them at $5 a pound, and you just don't bring them. The market does end up working its way out. But it's really, at the end of the day, though, when you start getting that stuff, those kind of, people can't help it. They just have to, they don't think about, when they're making a comment like that to somebody, it's like, I'm not just some employee at Walmart that's just throwing this out there on the table. I spent a lot of time doing that. It's fine. I get it. It's expensive. It's, you would rather spend your money. I respect that. But you don't have to tell the person, you can just, keep it to yourself. I don't know. Some people's kids.
My dad's so sad.
Well, these are usually, it's definitely generational, and it's usually not the 30 and under crowd that mentions anything about price.
Yeah.
It's usually my mother's generation.
Well, they were raised with a really different food system, right? Because if you think about it,
canned food.
The small scale,
went out after World War II.
It's happened in the last 20 years or so.
That's true, yeah.
And I think
there was the Back to Earth movement and stuff in the 70s, and
that's true.
But that's not who you're talking to when they're complaining at price.
Right.
Or tomatoes is a great example. Around here, tomatoes do not grow well. You have to put them in a greenhouse. It costs $9,000 to build it, and the amount of work that goes into trellising them and trying to get them in there. And then we charge $4 or $5 a pound or more. And I think that's really expensive. But when you start adding up what it took to grow it, no one is gouging anybody at that price. You're really not. In fact, I don't think we're going to grow tomatoes next year, because even if we sell all of them at $5, it doesn't make sense. It's not a good. I can cut lettuce at $2 a head all day long and make 3 times the amount of money than you can on a $5 tomato. I don't know. So, I don't know. That's a part of the food system that's kind of interesting is, we can grow zucchini or lettuce just as cheap as they can at a huge field in California, almost as cheap, even though they're at scale. But I cannot do that with green beans because it becomes it's mechanized. But zucchini's not. You're still out there cutting zucchini no matter what you do, and same with lettuce or broccoli. So we can become really competitive on those products. So when they say you're starting a farm, find a niche, it's really not. It's the most profitable things are cucumbers, zucchini, lettuce, those things people eat every day, and they're all hand harvested. There's no machine that makes it faster. You can compete.
Right.
something that struck me working here is like how much you think about the cost effectiveness of all the types of produce that you're growing and how much labor is going into them and trying to be conscious of that. And like, I think something that the consumer definitely doesn't see or think about is how much, I guess, capitalism influences the way that you farm. Because at the end of the day, it's a business and you have to make money.
Yeah.
And so that shapes your farming practices in a lot of different ways, and hiring practices and how much people get paid and how much food costs, right?
Yeah.
And
well, sustainability isn't just the environment. You know, you have to be financially sustainable to be there tomorrow, to keep taking care of the land. Otherwise, you know, it'll go to something that's not environmentally sustainable and is only financially sustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
When you started farming, were you surprised by that?
No. I really think, like, when I take heed to people's warnings. Like, I don't, I think when people see it from the outside, they think I just, like, jump into things, and I'm definitely not one of the people, type of person that researches things to death. But when I make a decision to do something, you have a lot of time to think in the field when you're reading. And, I mean, you really can do a lot of thinking. And that doesn't mean I'm on the internet researching the cost of every, little piece of something when you're out there doing the thinking. But you definitely... So anyways, when, like, there's efficiency things, every time, it's very capitalistic, everything that you do, you have to think about a way to do it cheap enough to sell it, to meet that price. And, I had a kind of an argument with not an argument, but, anyways, I was speaking with one of the distributors, and the comment was made like, yeah, but you can set your own price. In other words, like, selling this way, you can set your own price. If you sell to a huge distributor, they tell you what they'll pay you for your product. And I said, well, that's not true. I can't set... I mean, even though you're not telling me that you're going to buy the beets from me at $2 a bunch, I have to sell them at $2 a bunch, because that's what the market can bear. Like, I don't get to determine that. I mean, there's just... even when people say, well, you can be a price maker or a price taker. Well, you're always a price taker, even at the farmer's market. At that $5 a bean, or a pound for beans, that was the price that I could take for the amount that we could grow, and I didn't grow any more than that. I mean, it's not super profitable. It's not like I can, if the guy at the stall next to me is selling tomatoes at $4 a pound, I'm not going to be able to sell them for $6. I can't just, like, make up the price. I mean, there is still the invisible hand that occurs, right? And then when you're out in the field, it's like, we finally figured out how to make peas profitable. We were, you sell peas and we were never making any money, and we finally figured out, like, how to be really efficient at it and how to pick really fast. And even the thought goes through my head, it's like, we are going to pick peas at this hour during the day because this is when employees are the freshest, their backs aren't worn out because we're standing up. I mean, because there's certain crops like that, like, and, let's say, like, this morning we harvested, the first things were carrots and beets and radishes, because you're bent over, you're in the mud, you got to get that stuff while you're still kind of fresh, because if you try to do that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're just not going to be efficient. And not only, I want to do it that way too, like, not just because I'm going to get more work out of myself and everybody working with me, but it's more pleasant doing it in the morning when you're so fresh. And then in the afternoon, we spend all afternoon just washing vegetables. So now we're, like, under a roof, it's not raining on us. It can be a little bit warmer if we have a heater out here or something, but so all of those thoughts do definitely go into it a day. Yeah. Fill up the truck before you run it out of the field and back up to the wash shed. Like, it's got to be filled to the brim because you don't want to run back and forth 10 times. Don't step out into the field without a bucket in your hand or a knife. You have 2 hands. You should always have 2 things in them. There's just all those little efficiencies. And it took me a while to learn that. Observing other people who are really efficient. Yeah.
Right. What do you think some of the challenges are in the food system at a larger scale? It could be locally or like nationally. Globally.
I visited a farm yesterday because I bought something off of Craigslist, and I said he only grows 2 vegetables, and he's like under 10 acres. He grows only 2 vegetables, and he has 3 employees, and he was about finished for this season at the end of September, and he said he does well for himself. I don't know what that means exactly, but his place was really nice and neat. It wasn't cluttered everywhere because he has time to keep it clean. He had nice equipment. I mean, you never know. Someone could be like up to their eyeballs in debt and have all this, but that wasn't my feeling. So he was able to figure it out with a distributor. He just sells to one person. He sells 2 vegetables on 10 acres, and that's all he does. He's super efficient, and he's making money. And my life's pretty chaotic. Right now it like feels out of control, especially when your phone breaks and you don't have it for 3 days, and working 2 jobs and everything. But so that becomes I think that's a problem. Is I cannot get. It's not very easy for me to break into a big distributor where I can just grow 2 crops and become really, really efficient. If every farm, let's say there's 30 of us in the valley, and a couple valleys here, and if all 30, I grow 60 different varieties of crops, but if everyone specialized in one, everyone would become profitable, I think. Now that's a utopia, that's just not going to occur, but a distributor is not really able to work with me. I'll be right back.
Oh yeah.
You're not coming tomorrow? Yeah, that means we can move up to the house where it's warm and.
Oh sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right. So the question was like challenges of the food system from a farmer's perspective locally.
Yeah. So getting the food into the system to the wholesale distributors is hard. So if you wanted to go into Hagen's or Safeway or Fred Meyer, any of those, it's really hard to get food into those. And it's from their perspective, they want to have the volume and the consistency. And it's really hard to do unless you're growing a lot. But I contend, like on 10 acres, I could probably grow 2 things and a lot of them and be able to do that and be consistent. And take the price. I mean, their price is really quite a bit lower, but when you start thinking about, to go to the farmer's market, I have to own a truck, and I mean, there's a lot of things you have to, when you start marketing on your own, and the amount of time you spend off the farm marketing it, and those guys, they come to your farm and pick it up, So getting into those, or having the buyers for those kind of take the approach where they're willing to work with. I think if you were to talk to them, I think they would tell you, yeah, we're willing to do that, but in reality, it doesn't seem to be the reality. I can't say that I've ever called up a produce buyer. I wouldn't even know how to get a hold of one from those, but through some of the distributors I work with, they can't even get in to talk to those buyers, even though they're a distributor, because they're not one of the really big distributors. And I'm learning more about being involved with the food hub, and then it's pretty cutthroat too. I mean, if I start selling zucchini to, let's say, Safeway, that means somebody else isn't selling the zucchini they already have, and that somebody else is probably not going to sit back and take that for very long, and they probably have more resources to kind of basically undercut me for a while and not make any money for maybe a couple months until it comes back. So that's one problem, getting it to distributors locally. Another problem is it's easier to get it out of other regions where it can be like California produce or something like that, and that's because fuel is just too cheap. If it were more realistically priced, I think you would probably see food being priced more to reflect more of what it actually costs to grow it and move it around. But the real problem is transporting it on the highway, right? It's too cheap to get it out of California and up to Washington State. I mean, it's crazy how cheap that is. How efficient we've gotten at that.
Right. Do you feel like there's different challenges to the food system at a global level?
I don't know much about the whole global. I mean, we're seeing stuff out of Chile or something like that. Grapes out of Chile when it's not grape season here, and that kind of blows my mind that they can ship grapes that long and it actually, it's refrigerated the whole way and it stays good. I mean, actually, when you really think about the quality of it, it's really pretty good. I know they can't do that with all products, but grapes is an example. I mean, even 30 years ago, you didn't find melons in the store out of season, but I think you can get melons pretty much year round now, right?
Yeah, almost.
Seems like.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Because of that too, now it's not such the people who really are into it, it is a treat when it's melon season. But anyways, it's not a real treat like when it's corn season, right? When the sweet corn's on, it's like, they've already had it for 3 months because they've been getting it out of California. So all of a sudden it's like, there's not that event that used to be, oh, it's sweet corn season and everyone goes and buys sweet corn and eats kind of seasonally that way. Or it's strawberry season for 1 month. That's really not the case, right? So that, that I'm sure that has all kinds of ripple effect. Global food, I don't know too about when you talk about human rights, and I mean it's bad enough here how we treat employees, and I can't imagine what it's like in some countries.
Yeah, it's interesting. People complaining about the sticker price of food that's grown locally in an ecologically sustainable way, with people who are paying a living wage, because you're paying the true cost of the food, and the food that's at the supermarket that's super cheap that we're accustomed to, we're not paying the true cost of, unless it's a high yield grain product that's all mechanized,
Yeah, when we try to add that or try to explain maybe a higher price, not everything is a higher price than what you actually get in the store, but probably over 50% of the items, when I go to the farmer's market tomorrow, is going to be higher than the price you would pay for conventional food at a chain store. And when you think about the true cost of food, so if it's really seasonal and if it's something that's not super labor intensive, I think you can still find that good deal. But when you talk about paying a living wage, and then the people, it's the same people that complain about the cost of the beans are the same people who are complaining that there's no one pays you enough for your work, or there's an immigrant problem here. I mean, it's the same people complaining about that are actually causing that problem, kind of third hand causing that problem on the people that are usually making it part of their lifestyle to buy fresh vegetables, pay the extra money. They're kind of voting or protesting with their dollar. Those are the ones that I think maybe have more of a whole view of that problem, for sure.
When you started farming, what was your motivation in starting to farm?
Oh, I just like growing plants, I think. Searching for that perfection when you're trying to grow something, you do a good job of it. And it's you don't find a job that you love, that kind of thing.
How do you feel your motivations evolved?
To continue farming. Oh, I'm just stubborn. I don't want to fail. That's part of it. That's part of why I'm still doing it. Because if I quit, I mean, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The amount of time and money I have invested, it's I could really go buy an excavator and a skid steer and be digging foundations, still be outside. Of course, it's a little bit more boring, maybe, for me. But anyways, you'd have less time invested, less money invested in equipment, and a lot less liability and overhead, and be making a lot more money, right? So, I don't know. What was the question again?
How has your motivation evolved?
Like, what's motivating you to continue doing this work?
Yeah, not failing. I mean, that's part of it. I really do like the work. I mean, really, again, in September, I really wish the work was more manageable. Like, it would be nice if I could do it in 40 hours a week. And again, if I could grow 2 crops and sell it to a distributor at a lower price and just not leave the farm trying to market it. And we kind of knew what the price was close at the beginning of the season. You know, I could do that. Yeah.
What are your long-term goals for your farm?
To grow 2 crops, sell it to a distributor. Totally.
Yeah?
Yeah. Make it just, I mean, I really want to see, I feel too, like if I got people working for me, and I owe something to them too. Like I can't just, I mean, you know, you could do a slow, you know, they can find other work, I understand that. But I like want to make it, like I will not make my wealth in somebody else's poverty. I don't necessarily believe in that, although what I pay people that work for me, is not making anybody, I mean, I don't even know if it would be considered middle class in this region. But I think you would be able to make your rent and eat. You're not starving, but you're not getting ahead in life on what I'm paying people. I'd like to see that change. And I feel I owe it to people when they, like I'm profiting off of other people's labor. I think I owe it to them to make their life better if they're making my life better. So that's a tough thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving me your time and adding a couple hours to your 60-hour work week.
Well, this is my break.
I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Thank you for listening to and supporting this project. I hope that it inspires you to think critically about our food system and to listen openly to the perspectives of others. This episode of Savory was recorded on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Snohomish people and edited on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Creating a podcast is a highly collaborative endeavor. Financial support for Savory came from the Quest Research and Scholarly Works Committee. Savory was produced, recorded, and edited by myself, Marika Dunham, under the guidance of the incredible Dr. Davy. Original music is by Cameron Lee. You can find his work at eelromance.com, and graphic design is by Jessica Matyas. You can follow her work at Matyas Creates on Instagram.